Human nature is to resort to average. That is human nature. So assuming that everybody else doing something in a certain way is definitionally average if everybody's doing it. Hey everybody. So I thought that we would have a productive discussion today. Not to say that we don't always do that. I was thinking there are a lot of what I would call misconceptions about personal finance. Like the other day I was on Twitter. Well, X. And this guy tweeted, he was like, nobody can possibly convince me that real estate isn't better than stocks. And then what you get is a bunch of people who certainly have an angle replying and just pumping this guy up. And then you see, I don't know, 1 out of every like 5 or 10 posts that responds where somebody says, hey man, just looking at your profile, seems like you run this commercial real estate agency, and yeah, you probably have some incentive to say that. And so if I was the average consumer looking at this thread, one person saying, well, real estate must be the best thing ever, and another person saying, well, actually, here's all these reasons that I think stocks are better. How would I make sense of that? It's kind of hard. It's actually downright impossible. I thought that today I could kind of walk through what I think are some maybe misconceptions or maybe mistakes that the average person makes with their finances, because the reality is the solution set is vast. It is wide. The average person could go invest in real estate or stocks or some combination of both and probably get to a pretty reasonable outcome. But there's certain things you kind of just can't get around. And the solution's usually not the enemy. The framework for thinking is usually the enemy. So let me give you just this list, and we'll see how long this goes. But I'll start with the first financial mistake or misconception that most people have. And it's not doing math. Can I just say that? The number one financial mistake that many people make is they simply don't do math. So I was at Costco the other day on a Sunday. The worst place in the world to be on a Sunday. And I was checking out, and the place was like an absolute zoo. It's a madhouse, you know, and getting into Costco is a privilege, right? You got to show your membership card for the privilege to be able to shop for discounted things. Bulk buys, whatever. I'm through the checkout line, and there's this lady behind me and what appears to be her mother. So let's say a middle-aged woman and her mom in the checkout line right behind me. And they're, you know, kind of fighting over, oh, who's going to pay for it? That kind of whole thing. It's cute. And the woman said to the mom, oh, well, you got me in here. Like, let me pay for it. And the mom's response was, oh, no, I've got it. I get cash back on my credit card. And now, I don't know what you think when you hear something like that. I mean, I hear people make irrational spending decisions based on the fact that they get credit card points or miles or whatever. I remember talking to somebody once who had tens of thousands of dollars in credit cards in debt. And I was just like, hey, man, like maybe we should pay some of this off. I don't know. And he was like, oh, no, like that's a good card. I get miles on it. That's how we take all my trips. And I was like, at what cost does that become not worth it? Like, at what cost do I start to go, yeah, you know what, maybe I shouldn't spend this money because the fact that I'm paying 27.5% interest far outweighs the number of miles I could ever get on United. Like, I don't know. Or in what world does it possibly make sense to justify spending all this money on my Costco purchase that somebody else willingly offered to pay for because the miles or the points are making up for it? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Granted, okay, maybe this is a bad example because, like, you know, the mom's just giving an excuse and she wants to help the kid, yada, yada. But I can't tell you how many times people rationalize really bad spending decisions by saying, well, I get credit card points for it. Have you ever actually added up what those credit card points are worth? I can guarantee you nobody's ever made money spending on a credit card. But who am I to say that, right? Okay, not doing math. Here's another one. The average person loves to make decisions that over-optimize towards absolute investment return. Hold on a second. I thought you said you were talking about not doing math. Isn't 12% better than 8%? Yes, 12% is always better than 8%. Except for when you start to consider the invisible costs of certain investments. I think most people, if they were actually given the list of things to consider when considering a private, illiquid, thinly traded security that has a high degree of risk and maybe a possible 12% return versus a publicly traded, highly liquid, easily accessible alternative investment or a public investment, wouldn't actually make the trade-off if they knew what they were getting into. Like a lot of times people will monitor houses, real estate, and they'll say, well, I'm going to go buy this single family rental because when I put it on paper, here's the return. Without actually factoring in the fact that there's no liquidity for however long you're holding it. And in a real estate market like we might have today in Austin, Texas, where I just saw the house 4 doors down the street get listed and then taken down 20% in 7 days, you might not actually be able to sell your asset for what you thought it might be worth. How much more return do you have to get compensated for the lack of flexibility in something? How do you value flexibility or lack thereof? There has to be some sort of some way to compensate for that. But the average person will simply look at something and say, well, this pays 12 and this pays 8, therefore I want 12. Without considering all the things that might happen in your life along the way to actually get to that point. I don't know, maybe a reasonable point. Not doing math. Okay, here's another one. Assuming that your company just takes out the right amount in taxes. Hey, I got a paycheck and here was the top line gross income and I got a bonus and then they took something out and then I got the rest. And since they already paid the taxes for me, I must be able to spend everything else. Except for the fact that your company has no idea how much other money you made, if you have a spouse who made income, what sort of deductions you have. Nope, it's just a complete guess. But it might be right, therefore, I'm just going to assume that I can spend everything else. And so many times I see people come to tax time and they start filling out their return. They get their W-2, their 1099s, whatever. And all of a sudden they're way short and they hadn't thought about it. Well, my company screwed me over. Did they? Or did I just choose not to participate in actually understanding my income and how much money I really owe to the government? Not doing math. Believing everything that everybody says about money or investments. I think that's another mistake that many people make. Somebody says something about an investment or about some sort of return that they made. A lot of times we tend to just believe that at face value and take it for what it is. Oh, this person bought this house 10 years ago and then sold it and they made 10x their money. Wow. Despite the fact that we might not consider, well, here was the set of circumstances that existed 10 years ago. And here's the set of circumstances that exist today. And that opportunity may or may not still be present. They may not consider the fact that if you buy something for $100,000 and then sell it for $1 million, but along the way you had to pay taxes and insurance and make capital improvements, you didn't actually 10x your money. Not considering the opportunity cost of potentially investing in, I don't know, the S&P 500 and figuring out that the difference between what you did and what you could have done in something else is just opportunity cost. Or that's the actual true incremental value because you could have done something else probably with a lot less effort. I don't know. But a lot of times we like to take, hey, I spent $100,000, I made $1 million, and you must have 10x your money. Maybe it's real. And along those same lines, I would say one mistake, and kind of harping on it, but it is true. It's like not participating in your own learning. At the end of the day, who's responsible for your own money? It's you. And nobody's ever going to care about your own stuff, your own situation, more than you will. I was talking to a builder trying to build this house. And I was going to do a little bit of work on the back of my house. And he was like, hey, so if we do this job, we're going to have to rebuild the whole back wall. And because of that, we're going to have to use this temporary scaffolding. So we're going to have to, use all this wood for a temporary structure and then tear it down and then rebuild it later. And that's going to create a lot of waste, is what he said. He said that's going to cost about $8,000 for the extra wood and labor, the lumber. And at the end of it, we're probably not going to be able to use it, but there might be this way. I might be able to use it. And we might be able to salvage some of it for a different part of the project, but I don't know. And that'll save you $8,000. But if we do it, it's probably going to add some time to the project, and we'll probably have to add a different cost because we're going to have to repurpose the wood in some way, shape, or form. And I just wanted to see what you thought about it. Was the question I got. Now, $8,000, that's a legitimate expense. It's a real amount of money. But the thing is, he was like, well, if we did this, it might add a month or two to the project. Now, mind you, if I do this construction project, I'm going to have to leave this house and go rent somewhere. Well, renting is going to cost me, I have no idea, $2,000, $3,000 a month. I really don't know. But if I'm going to have to add a month or two to the project to save this $8,000 expense, I've now picked up another $4,000 or $6,000 expense of rent. So my real cost isn't actually $8,000. It's $8,000 plus this potential rent expense, which, no fault to this guy, but it was like, there's no context for that decision when he's presenting it to me. So I had to tell him, well, I'm going to go ahead and say that the time and less decisions to make are more valuable to me, because if it's another month or two, that to me sounds like 3, by the way. If it's another month or two to save $8,000, that's just not worth it because I have all these other things. But when taken at face value, if you don't choose to participate in your own learning, that's an $8,000 expense I saved. Wow. What a great life. You have to participate. On the flip side, you have to participate, but know at which point your expertise ends. And I think that's really important. A lot of people will make decisions with very little information, often based on anecdotes, and assume that it's going to work out. Or assume that everybody else is doing this, therefore it must be right. Nick Saban, I think in the first episode of Hard Knocks or whatever, was like, look, human nature is to resort to average. That is human nature. So assuming that everybody else doing something in a certain way is definitionally average if everybody's doing it. So if you want to be average, great. That's fine. But just know that there's usually better decisions you can make than average. I was at the gym the other day, and I don't know why it just struck me this time when I went there, but I was just looking around the room and it was pretty full. Let's say there was like 50 people in there, so it was a reasonable enough sample size. I would say of that group of people in the gym, 90% of the people in the gym didn't have a trainer with them. So they were just kind of going about things on their own. Mind you, you have to remember, if you're in the gym, you've filtered for people who choose to be in the gym versus not. But these people are in the arena, right? They were paying attention to their own health and fitness. Just like if you're listening to a podcast, you're probably paying attention to your own finances. But 90% of the people in the arena didn't have a trainer. They were just going about it on their own. I would say that 99% of the people who didn't have a trainer probably could benefit in some way from using one. I think that's a fair statement. They would find some value, and almost universally, everybody would have something they could gain. The problem is that of the 10% of people who are actually using a trainer, who are in the arena and getting help, 80% of the trainers have literally no idea what they're talking about. It's kind of brutal. So that naturally gives people skepticism. And the reality is that the average person, the the default experience is that people are just going about it on their own because they don't necessarily know any better. Which, if you were to kind of take all of this information, say there's a group of people who aren't in the arena, there's a group of people in the arena doing it on their own, there's a group of people working with trainers. By the way, most of them are pretty bad. What that means is the only possible solution for you to have the most predictable, positive outcome is to take the learning on yourself. You can't be passive. You have to be able to learn and distinguish what helps somebody make a good decision, whether it's financially or their fitness and health or anything else. If you simply rely on other people without having any context for the decisions or the information they're giving you, you have no idea what kind of outcome you're going to get. And you might get lucky and you might have a really good experience. But that just can't always be the expected outcome if human nature is to resort to average. Here's another mistake that I see a lot, and it's that the average person doesn't read their employee benefits manual. They just don't even look at it. And for a lot of people, especially higher earning professionals, much of, if not most of their compensation is driven by things that are outside of their base salary, whether that's bonuses, stock-based compensation, employee stock purchase programs, retirement plans, retirement plan matches, things like that. There are so many things that can drive your compensation outside of your base salary. And most of the time, the gate is simply knowledge. It's simply looking at it and saying, oh, shoot, I didn't know my employer gave me $1,000 into my HSA if I simply signed up. Nobody told me that. Whose responsibility is that? Nobody told me that. I don't know. But if they give you the information, you might as well use it to make a decision with your eyes wide open. I think I saw a stat that was for the people who get stock-based compensation, something like 50% of the people don't fully understand what that means. And a lot of times I've seen people who have, 5, 6, even 7-figure stock grants that will come to me and say, hey, I know I have this, but I actually don't know what it means. And you know what? That's okay because they're looking, they understand where their limitation sits, but simply having it and not knowing what it means is not necessarily a good recipe for a good outcome. I've actually seen stuff that says there are, I think something like a quarter of all employee stock grants, employee stock comp plans, literally sit in that account and nothing ever happens to them. Like, they never look at it. They never check it. It just sits there and it goes untended for who knows how long. So information can be really, really valuable. And knowing how to act on that information is a lot more. Here's the last one. While I'm on this rant. It's forgetting to invest the money that you put in your retirement accounts. Oh, well, I've been putting $7,000 a year for 5 or 10 years away, and it's the same value. Why is that? Just because you put money into an IRA or a Roth IRA or a brokerage account doesn't mean it's going to get invested. It just sits there in cash until you do something else. I literally saw a story about a guy who made Roth IRA contributions for 10 years. 10 years. And it all went into cash until somebody else looked at his statement and he went, hey, bro, this is just sitting there in cash, right? You did the first part. You opened the Roth IRA and you got money in there, but it's just sitting there. And nobody's going to invest that unless you start that process. Unless you do it yourself or you choose to go find somebody else who can do it for you. Now, both of those have a different set of parameters and a different set of responsibility. But at the end of the day, the onus is still on you to make sure that money gets invested. I'm sorry, but it's just true. We've moved completely away from this society that has pensions and is going to live on their Social Security benefit for the rest of their life. Everybody has to save on their own now. That's how people retire. And if you aren't able to accumulate in an effective manner, there isn't going to be something at the back ends that helps you. It's just how we are. So you've got to be able to have enough information to be able to make a proper decision at the right time. That's really it. Anyway, I don't know why I got on this. Maybe it's because I was at Costco and somebody was trying to pay for something and they thought their credit card points were a good justification for doing that. Maybe this was useful to you. Maybe it wasn't. Let me know either way. superfallstreet.com. See you there. Bye, everybody.